Hello, everybody. So, in this first video, I will be presenting a new series talking about the different themes that can be found in modern day North American horror movies. In today's video, it will talk specifically about psychological trauma. So, there will be themes here that may not be appropriate for everyone. So please be forewarned if psychological trauma and the subcategories about it is not something you feel that you want to expose yourself to or others. Please go to any one of my other playlists or videos on my channel. If you like, comment, and share, it's much appreciated. Thank you very much. So, psychological trauma is often defined as characters who struggle with grief, guilt, PTSD, depression, or repressed memories that manifest as supernatural or psychological horrors. This theme may not be present in every single horror movie in North America, but it is a quite often used theme, whether as the predominant theme or a side theme. It can often also be represented in other movies, even comedies or romance. Psychological trauma has become one of the defining characteristics of modern North American horror. While earlier horror films often focused on external threats, such as monsters, vampires, or slashers, many contemporary horror films ask a different question. What if the greatest horror comes from wounds that already exist within the characters? Trauma is no longer just a character's backstory. It frequently becomes the central force driving the narrative, influencing how characters perceive reality, interact with others, and confront supernatural or human threats. In many modern horror films, trauma functions as an invisible antagonist. The traumatic event may have occurred years before the story even begins, but it continues to shape the protagonist's life. The horror often stems from the inability to escape painful memories. Common traumatic experiences include the death of a spouse, child, or parent, childhood abuse or neglect, sexual assault, domestic violence, military combat and PTSD, serious accidents, addictions and recovery, survivor's guilt, witnessing violent crimes, or even family abandonment. Rather than portraying trauma as something that simply goes away, horror presents it as something that follows the individual wherever they go. A hallmark of psychological horror is giving emotional pain a physical form. Instead of saying the character cannot move on in any way, shape, or form, the movie may show a ghost that refuses to leave the house, a monster that appears only to the victim, a cursed object that ties to pain and memories of horrible events, hallucinations that blur with reality, a recurrent nightmare that begins affecting waking life. The supernatural often symbolizes unresolved emotional wounds rather than existing solely for scares. One of the most common traumatic themes is grief. Characters frequently struggle after losing a child, parent, spouse, a sibling, or close friend. The horror asks uncomfortable questions. What if the grief never ends? What if refusing to let go creates something monstrous? Can love become destructive? Many haunted house stories are actually stories about bereavement disguised as ghost stories. Modern North American horror increasingly explores trauma passed from one generation to another. Examples of this include cycles of abuse, family secrets, addiction, mental illness, religious extremism, and violence normalized within families. Children inherit emotional burdens from parents long before they understand them. The horror suggests that people often become trapped in cycles established decades earlier. Another recurrent theme involves forgotten or suppressed memories. Characters gradually realize they experienced something terrible in childhood, including witnessing murder, abuse, cult involvement, supernatural encounters, or family betrayals. As the memories return, reality begins to unravel. The frightening aspect is often not discovering the monster, but remembering what was hidden. Many protagonists exhibit symptoms associated with trauma, including constant alertness, difficulty sleeping, panic attacks, emotional numbness, irritability, social withdrawal, and flashbacks. Whether the threat is supernatural or real, viewers often cannot initially determine whether the danger exists externally or only the traumatized character's perception. This uncertainty created by PTSD and hypervigilance creates tension throughout the film. Modern horror movies frequently place audiences inside the mind of someone whose perception cannot fully be trusted. The viewer wonders, are the ghosts real? Are the monsters imagined? Is the character hallucinating? Is someone manipulating them? The uncertainty becomes frightening because both the audience and the protagonist lose confidence in reality. Haunted houses often represent psychological states. Different parts of the home symbolize different aspects of trauma. Basements represent buried memories. Locked rooms symbolize emotional repression. Attics contain forgotten family history. Crumbling walls reflect deteriorating mental health. Endless hallways mirror anxiety and confusion. Escaping the haunted house often symbolizes confronting painful memories rather than simply fleeing a dangerous place. Survival's guilt appears frequently as well in modern horror. Characters believe they caused another person's death. Common examples include surviving an accident that killed friends, failing to save a loved one, making a decision with tragic consequences, or abandoning someone in danger. Whether or not they are truly responsible, guilt becomes an inescapable force that manifests through visions, hauntings, or relentless psychological torment. Traumatized characters often withdraw from society as they may avoid family, lose friendships, develop addictions, quit work, refuse therapy, or become emotionally detached. This isolation makes them more vulnerable to both real and imagined horrors. Modern horror frequently portrays loneliness as a catalyst that amplifies fear. Many films intentionally blur the distinction between psychological disorders and paranormal phenomena. Characters and the viewers are left asking, is it schizophrenia or possession? Is it grief or haunting? The ambiguity sustains suspense. At the same time, many contemporary films avoid implying that mental illness itself is evil. Instead, they explore how psychological suffering can complicate a person's ability to interpret extraordinary events. Family relationships often become the emotional center of modern horror. Trauma may involve emotionally unavailable parents, overprotective parents, childhood neglect, domestic, domestic abuse, divorce, sibling rivalry, loss of trust. The monster frequently exploits existing family fractures rather than creating them. Psychological trauma resonates because it reflects the experiences many viewers can recognize in themselves or others. While few encounter ghosts or demons in real life, many understand grief, fear, guilt, or anxiety. Horror transforms these internal struggles into vivid external threats, allowing audiences to engage with difficult emotions from a safe distance. This approach also changes the emotional stakes. Instead of simply asking whether a character will survive the monster, modern North American horror often asks whether they can confront what they've been avoiding all this time. In many stories, defeated or even understanding the external horror requires acknowledging the internal one. That blend of psychological realism and supernatural metaphor has become one of the greatest genres defining strength, making contemporary horror both frightening and emotionally resonant.